She was skin and bones when I found her. Now she's the most beautiful woman in the Wild West. The sun was sinking low over the wide, empty land of the Wild West when he saw her. The sky was painted in soft orange and dusty pink, but the ground below was dry, cracked, and unforgiving. The wind moved slowly, carrying sand and silence together. He had been riding for hours, following a narrow trail that few people used anymore. Most travelers avoided this area because it was lonely and dangerous. But he had learned long ago that lonely places often hid the most important moments of a man's life. At first, he thought she was a pile of old clothes or a broken sack left behind by careless travelers. She lay still near a dried-up stream, half covered by dirt and weeds. His horse slowed on its own, sensing something was wrong. He narrowed his eyes and leaned forward, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. Something told him this was not just trash on the ground. He climbed down from his horse and stepped closer. With each step his heart beat louder. Then he saw her face. She was a woman young, but life had not been kind to her. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin pale and dusty, stretched tightly over sharp bones. Her clothes were torn and far too big for her thin body, as if they once belonged to someone stronger. Her hair was dry and tangled, falling around her face like dead grass. She looked like she had not eaten properly in weeks, maybe longer. Every breath she took was shallow and slow, as if her body was unsure whether it should keep going. He knelt beside her, careful and quiet, afraid that even a small movement might break her. He had seen hunger before. He had seen sickness. But this was different. This woman looked like she had been forgotten by the world itself. He placed 2 fingers gently on her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, weak but real. Relief washed over him, mixed with fear. Keeping her alive would not be easy. Helping her could bring trouble. In the Wild West, helping strangers often did. People asked questions, people talked. And sometimes the past followed a person whether they wanted it to or not. For a moment he thought about riding away. No one would blame him. This land taught people to survive, not to care. Many men had lost their lives trying to be heroes. He was not a young man anymore, and he had his own scars, his own reasons to stay out of trouble. He could leave her some water, maybe a little food, and hope someone else came along. But when he stood up, ready to walk back to his horse, her hand moved. Her fingers were thin like sticks, trembling as they reached for nothing. Her lips parted slightly and a sound came out, so soft he almost missed it. It was not a word, just a breath filled with pain and fear. That sound stopped him. He looked down at her again and something deep inside him shifted. He did not see danger anymore. He did not see trouble. He saw a human being at the edge of life, alone in a land that showed no mercy. He sighed slowly, as if accepting a fate he could not escape. "All right," he murmured, though she could not hear him. "I won't leave you." He took off his coat and gently placed it over her shoulders. She was so light when he lifted her that it shocked him. It felt like holding a child, not a grown woman. Her head rested against his chest, and he could feel how weak her heartbeat was. Every step back to his horse felt heavy, not because of her weight, but because of the responsibility he had just accepted. He tied her carefully across the saddle, making sure she was secure and comfortable. His horse shifted but stayed calm, as if it understood the importance of the moment. Before climbing on, he took one last look at the empty land around them. No one else was coming. If he had not found her today, she would not have lasted another night. The ride back to his cabin was slow. He avoided rough paths and sharp turns, speaking softly to keep her calm even though she never opened her eyes. As the sky darkened, the air grew colder. He worried about her breathing, about whether she would make it all the way. Several times he stopped to check on her, giving her small sips of water, whispering words he did not even realize he knew. When his cabin finally came into view, he felt a small spark of hope. It was not much, just a wooden building with a single room built to survive storms, not to impress anyone. But it was warm and it was safe. Inside, he laid her on his bed and lit a lamp. The soft yellow light revealed just how badly she had suffered. Old bruises marked her arms. Her hands were rough, as if she had worked hard despite having nothing. Her face, though thin and tired, still held something gentle. Even in her condition, there was a quiet beauty there, hidden beneath pain and hunger. He cleaned her wounds as best as he could, using water and clean cloth. He moved slowly, respectfully, giving her space even while caring for her. When she stirred, her eyes fluttered open for a brief second. They were dark and full of fear, darting around the room like a trapped animal. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're safe." She did not answer. Her eyes closed again and her body relaxed just a little. That night he sat beside her, listening to the wind outside and the steady sound of her breathing. He did not know her name. He did not know where she came from or what she had endured. But he knew one thing for certain: finding her was not an accident. In a land where most people only looked out for themselves, two broken lives had crossed paths. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment, on a forgotten trail under a fading sun, was the beginning of something that would change them both forever. Morning light crept slowly into the cabin through the small window. The land outside was quiet, but inside, life was fighting to stay. He had not slept much. Every few minutes during the night, he checked her breathing, afraid it might stop if he looked away for too long. Each shallow rise of her chest felt like a small victory. When the sun finally rose, he stood and stretched his stiff back. The woman lay still on the bed, wrapped in blankets. Her face looked a little calmer than before, though weakness still showed in every line. He placed a hand near her forehead. It was warm, but not burning. That was a good sign. He moved quietly, preparing what little food he had. He crushed some dried grain into a thin soup and warmed water over the fire. He knew better than to give her too much. A body that had known hunger for so long needed patience, not haste. When he brought the cup to her lips, she stirred again. This time her eyes opened slowly. They looked around the room, confused and frightened. Her body tensed as if she expected harm. "Easy," he said gently. "You're safe here." She tried to move, but her strength failed her. A soft sound escaped her throat, not a word, but full of effort. He supported her head and carefully tipped the cup. A few drops touched her lips. She hesitated, then swallowed. That small action filled him with hope. He stayed patient, letting her drink slowly. Each swallow took effort, but she did not push the cup away. When she was done, her eyes stayed open, studying him closely. "Where?" she whispered, her voice dry and thin. "My place," he replied. "You were found on the trail. You were very weak." Her brows pulled together as she tried to remember. Pain flickered across her face and she shook her head slightly. "Don't force it," he said. "Rest." She closed her eyes again, but this time there was less fear in her expression. The days that followed settled into a quiet routine. He woke early, tended to chores, and returned often to check on her. Sometimes she slept for hours, her body using every bit of strength to heal. Other times she woke and stared at the ceiling, lost in thoughts she did not share. He spoke to her even when she did not answer. He told her about the weather, the land, and small, simple things. He believed that hearing a human voice could remind the heart that it was not alone. Slowly, very slowly, she began to change. Her breathing grew steadier. Color returned faintly to her cheeks. She could sit up for short moments, though it left her tired. Each day she drank a little more and ate a little more. Her hands stopped shaking so badly. Her eyes followed him when he moved around the room. One afternoon, as he changed the cloth on her arm, she finally spoke again. "Why?" she asked. He looked up. "Why what?" "Why help me?" Her eyes searched his face as if expecting a lie. He paused. It was a fair question. In the Wild West, kindness was rare and often costly. "Because someone once helped me," he said at last, "and because leaving you there didn't feel right." She studied him for a long moment, then looked away. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. "I didn't think anyone would come," she said quietly. Those words stayed with him long after she fell asleep again. As her strength grew, small pieces of her story began to surface. She spoke in broken sentences, never all at once. She talked about traveling with people who promised work and safety. She talked about losing everything when things went wrong. Names were mentioned, then quickly swallowed back. Pain lived in those memories, and he never pushed her to say more. Trust was growing, slow and careful. One evening, he helped her sit near the fire. She watched the flames dance, her eyes reflecting the light. For the first time, she looked peaceful. "I don't even know your name," she said. He smiled slightly. "I suppose that would help." They shared names then, simple words but meaningful. Names made things real. Names made people human again. Outside, the world remained harsh. Windstorms passed. Distant sounds reminded him that not everyone in this land was kind. He kept his rifle nearby, not because he expected danger, but because caution had kept him alive for many years. He noticed changes others might have missed. The way her posture improved. The way her voice grew stronger. The way her eyes no longer held only fear but curiosity too. One morning she asked if she could stand. He hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, carefully, he helped her to her feet. Her legs trembled and she leaned heavily on him, but she stood. The look on her face, shock mixed with pride, was something he would never forget. "I thought I never would again," she whispered. "You will," he said, "just not all at once." They took small steps. One day she walked across the room. Another day she stepped outside the cabin and felt the sun on her face. She closed her eyes, breathing in fresh air like it was a gift. For the first time she smiled. It was not a wide smile, but it was real. He saw then what hunger and suffering had hidden. There was grace in her movements, even when weak. There was strength in her silence. Whatever she had been before the world broke her, it was still there, waiting. Yet shadows remained. Sometimes she woke from sleep with a sharp breath, her body tense. Sometimes loud noises made her flinch. He learned to give her space during those moments, to let calm return on its own. Healing was not just about food and rest. It was about safety. As days turned into weeks, the cabin no longer felt so lonely. Two lives moved within its walls, both changed by the quiet connection between them. Neither spoke of the future. They lived one day at a time, knowing that tomorrow was never promised. But one thing was clear. The woman who had been skin and bones on the trail was slowly returning to life. And with each passing day, she was becoming more than a survivor. She was becoming herself again. The weeks passed quietly, marked by small victories that meant everything. She could now walk on her own for short distances, though her steps were still careful. Each morning, she stepped outside the cabin and stood under the open sky, letting the sunlight warm her face. The land no longer looked like an enemy to her. It looked wide and full of promise. He watched her from a distance, never rushing her, never crowding her space. He had learned that healing moved best when it was allowed to take its own time. Some days she talked more, her voice stronger, her words clearer. Other days she stayed quiet, lost in thought. He respected both. One afternoon, while he repaired a fence near the cabin, she surprised him. "I want to help," she said. He looked up, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "Help with what?" "Anything," she replied. "I don't want to just lie around anymore." He studied her face. There was no weakness in her eyes now, only determination. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said, "but we go slow." She smiled again, brighter this time. He showed her small tasks first, sorting dried herbs, folding clean cloth, feeding the horse. Simple things, but each one made her feel useful. Her hands, once shaking, now moved with purpose. With every task she completed, her confidence grew. As she worked, he noticed how quickly she learned. She listened carefully, remembered instructions, and asked thoughtful questions. She was not just surviving anymore. She was growing. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire. She asked him about the land, about the towns beyond the hills, about the people who traveled through. He answered honestly, never hiding the truth but never frightening her either. "The West can be hard," he told her once, "but it can also be fair if you're strong enough." She nodded, staring into the flames. "I want to be strong," she said, "not just alive." That night she slept peacefully without sudden breaths or restless movement. When he saw that, he knew something inside her had shifted. Her past still came to her in pieces. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the roof, she spoke more than she ever had before. "I trusted the wrong people," she said quietly. "I believed their words. They said there would be work, food, a place to belong." He listened without interrupting. "When things went bad, they left," she continued. "I kept walking. I thought if I just kept moving, I would find something better." Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "I didn't think I mattered enough for anyone to look for me." Silence filled the cabin after she finished. He placed a cup of warm drink near her hands. "You matter," he said simply. She looked at him, and for the first time tears filled her eyes, not from pain but from something closer to relief. From that moment on, she stood taller. Her body continued to change. Color returned fully to her face. Her hair, once dull and tangled, grew softer and stronger. She tied it back with a simple ribbon he found in a supply box. When she laughed, it sounded natural, not forced. One day, he brought out an old mirror and handed it to her. She hesitated before taking it. When she finally looked, her breath caught. She studied her reflection slowly, like she was seeing a stranger. "I don't look like I remember," she said. "You look like someone who survived," he replied. She traced her reflection with her fingers, then nodded. "Yes," she said, "I did." As her strength returned, she began to learn things beyond the cabin. He taught her how to ride safely, how to read the land, how to tell when weather was changing. She fell once lightly and laughed instead of crying. The sound filled the open space around them. Word travels fast, even in wide places. Travelers passed by now and then, stopping for water or rest. They noticed her. Not just her appearance, but the calm way she carried herself. They spoke politely, with respect. Some asked questions, but she answered only what she wished. After they left, she always looked thoughtful. "They don't see me the way I used to see myself," she said once. "That's because you're not that person anymore," he answered. She thought about that for a long time. One afternoon, a woman from a nearby settlement stopped by. She needed help with sewing and offered payment. He looked at her, letting her decide. She hesitated, then nodded. The work was small but meaningful. When she returned, she held the coins tightly in her palm. "I earned this," she said, her voice full of pride. He smiled. "You did." That night, she placed the coins carefully beside her bed. They were more than money. They were proof. Still, not every day was easy. Some nights old memories returned, heavy and sharp. On those nights she sat by the fire until the feeling passed. He never asked questions. His quiet presence was enough. Slowly, people began to recognize her. In nearby towns, whispers followed her steps, not cruel ones but curious ones. They spoke of a woman who carried strength in her eyes, who had come from nothing and stood like she belonged. She noticed the looks but did not let them change her. She dressed simply. She spoke kindly. She did not try to impress anyone. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she stood on a hill near the cabin. The wind moved through her hair and she breathed deeply. "I used to think beauty was something you were born with," she said. "Now I think it's something you earn," he nodded. "The land teaches that lesson well." She smiled, looking out at the wide horizon. She was no longer the woman he found near the trail. She was not skin and bones. She was not forgotten. She was becoming known, not for what she had lost, but for what she had survived. And though the Wild West remained wild and uncertain, she now stood ready to face it, with steady feet and a strong heart. Life did not slow down as she grew stronger. In many ways, it moved faster. The more she stepped into the world beyond the cabin, the more the world noticed her. It was not only the way she looked now, though people did notice that. It was the way she stood, the calm in her voice, and the quiet confidence she carried like a shield. She began traveling with him to nearby towns. At first, she stayed close, observing more than speaking. The noise, the movement, and the number of people were overwhelming after so much silence, but she did not hide. She walked with her head up, her steps steady, even when eyes followed her. People whispered, but not in unkind ways. Some spoke of how different she looked from the last time they had seen her, thin and broken, barely holding on. Others wondered where she had come from, how she had changed so completely. She heard the whispers and let them pass. She had learned that not every voice deserved her attention. In one town, a shop owner asked if she could help with organizing supplies. In another, a family asked her to teach their daughter simple sewing skills. Each task added another layer to her sense of purpose. She was no longer waiting to be saved. She was building something of her own. He watched these changes quietly. He did not guide her every step anymore. She did not need that. Instead, he stayed close enough to help if she asked, far enough to let her choose her own path. There was pride in his eyes when he saw her speak with confidence, when he saw others listen. Not everyone welcomed her presence. One afternoon, as they stopped near a crowded trading post, a man stared at her with narrowed eyes. His gaze lingered too long, filled with something cold and measuring. She felt it immediately. The old fear stirred inside her, but she did not let it show. She met his eyes calmly, then looked away. Later, as they walked back toward their horses, the man spoke. "You look familiar," he said. Her heart beat faster, but her voice remained steady. "Many faces look alike out here." He stepped closer. "I think I've seen you before." He moved between them without raising his voice. "She said she doesn't know you." The man studied them both, then smirked and turned away, but the feeling he left behind stayed. That night she was quiet. "He reminded me of the past," she finally said. "Not him exactly, just the feeling." He nodded. "The past has a way of testing us." She stared into the fire. "I won't let it pull me back." And she didn't. The next weeks brought challenges of a different kind. Attention followed her now. Compliments, questions, and offers she did not ask for. Some were kind, others careless. She learned how to respond politely, how to set boundaries without anger. It was a skill she practiced daily. One evening, a woman approached her in town. "They say you're the most beautiful woman around here," the woman said. She smiled gently. "That's not something I think about much." The woman laughed. "That's why they say it." Those words stayed with her. Beauty, she realized, was no longer something fragile or uncertain. It was steady. It came from how she treated others and how she treated herself. Trouble came quietly, as it often did. A rumor began to spread, twisting her story into something it was not. People said she had been rescued from a terrible place. Others said she had run from something she should have faced. None of it was true, but stories grow fast in empty spaces. She heard about it from someone she trusted. "People are talking," they warned. "Some don't understand you," she nodded. "They don't have to." Still, she felt the weight of it. One night she sat alone outside the cabin, the stars sharp and bright above her. "I can't control what people say," she told him when he joined her, "but I can control who I become." "That's always been true," he said. The next day she made a choice. She began helping openly, not quietly. She assisted families in need, shared skills, offered support without asking for praise. Slowly, the rumors faded, replaced by actions people could see for themselves. When someone spoke poorly of her, another spoke up in her defense. "She's good," they said. "I've seen it." Strength shows itself in many ways. Hers showed in patience. One afternoon, she stood before a group of people who needed help organizing supplies for winter. She spoke clearly, confidently, explaining what needed to be done. They listened. They followed her lead. When it was finished, she stepped back, surprised at herself. Later, she laughed softly. "I didn't know I could do that." "You always could," he replied. "You just didn't have the chance." As seasons shifted, her presence became familiar. Children waved when they saw her. Shop owners greeted her warmly. She was no longer a mystery. She was part of the land. Yet she did not forget where she came from. One evening she returned to the trail where she had once collapsed. She stood there silently, remembering the fear, the pain, the loneliness. Then she looked at herself now strong, steady, alive. She whispered a quiet thank you to the wind and turned away. That night she spoke with certainty. "I don't want my story to be about what happened to me," she said. "I want it to be about what I did after." He smiled. "It already is." The Wild West had not softened. It remained rough, unpredictable, and demanding. But she had learned its language. She knew when to stand firm and when to bend. She knew her worth and she would not give it away. People might call her beautiful. They might admire her strength. But what mattered most was this. She no longer feared being seen. She had faced hunger, loss, and silence, and she had come out stronger. Now when the wind moved across the open land and the sun dipped low, she stood tall, ready for whatever came next. The land changed again as time moved forward, but this time she did not feel lost in it. She understood its moods now, the quiet mornings, the sharp winds, the long evenings that stretched like thoughts. The Wild West no longer felt like a place that could break her. It felt like a place that had shaped her. People knew her name now. Not because of rumors, not because of whispers, but because of how she lived. She was the woman who helped without asking, the woman who listened, the woman who stood steady when things became difficult. Beauty was still mentioned, of course, but it was never the first thing people said anymore. "She's strong," they said. "She's kind." Some days were spent traveling to nearby towns, helping with work, sharing skills she had learned. Other days were quiet, filled with reading, sewing, or sitting under the open sky, letting the wind move through her hair. She had learned that peace did not have to be earned through suffering. It could be chosen. One afternoon, a young woman approached her near the trading post. Her eyes were unsure, her hands nervous. "I heard you were once lost," the girl said carefully. She smiled gently. "Yes, I was. How did you come back?" She thought for a moment. "I didn't come back all at once, just one small step at a time." The girl nodded like she had been given something important. Moments like that reminded her why her journey mattered. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. The cabin still stood where it always had, but it no longer felt like a place of recovery. It felt like home. Inside its walls were shared meals, quiet talks, and long silences that felt comfortable, not empty. He noticed the change too. "You don't look over your shoulder anymore," he said one evening. She considered his words. "I don't need to, I know where I stand now." He smiled, proud but quiet, just as he always had been. There came a day when she realized she had stopped thinking of herself as someone who had been saved. She had saved herself too, by choosing to live, to trust, to grow. Help had been given, yes, but strength had come from within. That understanding changed everything. When people asked her story, she no longer spoke with hesitation. She spoke calmly, without shame. She did not hide the hard parts, but she did not let them define her either. "I was broken," she said simply, "and then I healed." That was enough. One spring morning the land bloomed with color. Flowers pushed through dry soil, bright and stubborn. She stood among them, smiling softly. She had once felt like dry ground herself, empty, forgotten. Now life grew easily within her. She decided to do something she had never imagined before. She helped open a small place where travelers could rest, eat, and feel safe for a while. Nothing grand, just warmth, honesty, and kindness. People came tired and left lighter. Some stayed longer than planned. Some returned just to say thank you. Her presence set the tone, calm, fair, strong. "She makes you feel like you belong," someone once said. That was the greatest compliment of all. There were still hard days, there always would be, but she faced them without fear. When doubts crept in, she reminded herself of the woman she once was and the woman she had become. She had learned an important truth. Beauty fades if it is only on the surface. But beauty built from courage, patience, and kindness only grows stronger. One evening, as the sun lowered across the open land, she stood beside him on the porch of the cabin. "Do you ever regret stopping that day?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No, do you?" she smiled. "Not for a moment." They watched the horizon in comfortable silence. The wind carried the sound of distant life, movement, hope, tomorrow. She had started as someone barely holding on, unseen and unheard. Now she stood fully present, fully alive. The Wild West knew her name, but more importantly, she knew herself. She was not defined by hunger. She was not defined by loss. She was not defined by fear. She was defined by what she chose to become. And as the stars appeared one by one in the wide night sky, her story reached its quiet, powerful ending. Not as a tale of rescue, but as a story of strength, dignity, and a woman who rose, step by step, into the life she deserved.